Welcome to Becoming Podcast after 7 p.m. I'm your host, Stella O, and go ahead and subscribe at Becoming Stella O. Now, we're going to talk about heartbreak. This is going to be an interesting topic because it's not only going to be about heartbreak in general, but it's going to be heartbreak with women. As a woman, and how do we women deal with heartbreak? Now, how does a woman deal with her first heartbreak? Geez, is it that puppy love? Is that what we call the first heartbreak? When we're in elementary or in middle school and high school, some people experience their first heartbreak when they're in college. Everybody is different. How did it feel when you experienced a heartbreak? How did it feel before you had a heartbreak? Were you so in love, like you could do anything? You were like on cloud nine. I just wonder, how did you feel? I know for me, I felt like I could do anything. I could be anything. I felt like I was the only girl in the world. Until the heartbreak came. But before we get to that, everybody's heartbreak is not always with that crush that you have, or the person you're dating, or the person that you may actually think you is your forever. I'm going to go deep. I'm going to tap into areas where I feel like we don't have conversations about. Because the first thing that pops in your head, heartbreak, you think about a significant other, a romance. But have you thought about that the heartbreak could be at home? Maybe the foundation that you thought you had was a good, strong foundation until the heartbreak came. What if that woman, her heartbreak was from her father? What if that heartbreak from her father was because she had a father? She experienced that love. She experienced that comfort. She experienced that protection. And then he suddenly left. What if the heartbreak wasn't that he actually walked out and never came back? What if the heartbreak was that he passed on? Wow, it's interesting. Because now, as I'm sitting here, I thought I knew my first heartbreak, but I was actually wrong. It's like I'm speaking to myself because my first heartbreak was when my father passed away. That was even before I matured into a woman. I was a young lady. That was my first heartbreak. Wow, I'm just realizing that right now. What if it was death? What if it was a misunderstanding? What if it was your brother? What if it was your cousin? Sometimes your first heartbreak is not another man. What if it's your mother, your sister, your friend? Maybe it's somebody that you thought would never turn their back on you. There was an expectation that you had. I know for me, my expectation was my father was always going to be here. My father is always going to be alive. My father is going to scold me, that tough love. I never thought that I would live most of my life without him. It did something to me. It shifted how I looked at life as a young lady. And I think even now, it shaped me who I am and how I deal with things moving forward. Now, I lost an expectation of that person who raised me as my dad. The idea of love that I lost, and sometimes I felt like I lost a part of me. Now, us women, we typically process our first heartbreak and the lasting effects of it differently. I don't know if I've ever got over that heartbreak. I think it shaped me for who I am. What if the first heartbreak was your puppy love, as they say, and you thought that this is the person you end up marrying? I've heard stories. I personally don't know individuals like this, but I've heard stories that we've known each other since middle school or since elementary school and become a couple. I wonder how that heartbreak is when they're adults, because you become a different person when you go from a child to a young girl, a young woman, and becoming an actual woman. How does that shape you of your expectation with your significant other? What is your idea of love? What is your idea of that? Do you feel like you become one with that person? I wonder how it is whenever the two become one, when they marry, and then that other person doesn't want to become one and they end up being apart. How does that heartbreak feel? I feel like the woman takes it much harder. Why? I feel like the woman's ramifications so much higher. Why? What if that marriage produced children? She has to now be the main person in most of the times. I'm not speaking about all the time, but most of the time, the woman has to bear being the mother, the provider, as in when I mean providing, taking care of the household, making sure that they go to school. And then we are also dealing with the emotional roller coaster of the entire household. We have to put aside that heartbreak, that torn heartbreak of the marriage. And what do you have to deal with? You have to deal with the heartbreak of the children. Are you actually healing? Or are you actually making it worse? I feel like for us women, we really put ourselves on the back burner to make things work. The children are a priority. Now we have to deal with the emotional side, the heartbreak of maybe the father not being there, spending divided time. What if the heartbreak is within a family? In my case, my father. How do we deal with that heartbreak as a sister, as a daughter? How do I deal with that as a young girl? I don't have something that I used to have. That heartbreak hurt because then I have to now maneuver into this world without that man that can correct me. Does that mean that I will make mistakes in my relationships? I believe so. I will go ahead and admit that. I think with the lack of my father and the heartbreak, the roller coaster and the shock and the denial made me maneuver in different ways. You know, they say women are very emotional, and we are. We are, but I don't take that as a negative thing. I take that we have to carry a lot. We have a lot that we have to deal with. And a lot of us women, it's a struggle to accept that this does not exist anymore. It's surreal. Do you blame us? Do you blame me for being in shock and in denial that I had to go through this heartbreak that I was not prepared for? Do you ever prepare yourself for something that's going to stop instantly? I don't think you ever can. I don't think you can ever fix it. I think you end up just living with the heartbreak. I think you adjust to the heartbreak. I think you also adjust to the pain. The pain, where does it go? Uh, I would see some people maybe work out or go to the gun range, releasing that anger, all that tension. Where does it go? Where does that denial go to? I believe it's a process. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just speaking on the experience as a woman of my first heartbreak and how it has affected me till today. And I didn't even realize. I thought I knew my first heartbreak, but as I kept on talking, I realized that it was different. What is your first heartbreak? Was it the typical high school? Or maybe you went to school and maybe it was the marriage never happened. Maybe the marriage happened and it didn't work. Or maybe you lost a loved one. I don't know. But I know that for us women, I've seen it within my sisters. I've seen it within my aunties. I've seen it with different women in different ages, even with my mother. She had a heartbreak that I cannot put it into words. I had my first heartbreak. I believe that my father was her last heartbreak, and it broke her. It was a shock that you could physically see it. How do you struggle with your heartbreak, and how do you cope with it when it's actually happening to you? How do you move on after a heartbreak? Do you fester in it? Do you wallow in it? Do you add something that's going to get you out of it? It is definitely hard being a woman, I will say. I used to hear this, but as life continues and life goes on, and the years and the pages on that book of mine is turning, it's a beautiful thing being a woman. It's a difficult thing being a woman. And it's a challenging thing being a woman. But there's so many things that come out of it that makes me smile as a woman. Feel like we go through this metamorphosis like a butterfly when it's in the cocoon. And I feel like at the moment you're in the cocoon, you're going through that heartache, that denial, like you're trapped, that shock. But during that process, you're going through that metamorphosis. And as you're going through it, you develop. You cry. You're in shock. You're in pain. You're disappointed in yourself. Doubt. You feel like it's over. You feel like there's nothing that you can do to get out of it. But as you're still in that process, you're changing. When you get up in the morning, when you move, when you speak life and you affirm certain things, it gets better. And as you break out of that denial and out of that shock, and you're able to wiggle yourself out. See, before you get to that part of getting out of that cocoon, you have to struggle. You have to struggle. You have to get yourself up and move. You have to grow. Grow enough to where you can break through that cocoon slowly. And as soon as you're able to do that, you're able to free yourself. Now, how long is the process? I believe it's different for different women. We're created in so many different ways, different colors, shapes. Psychologically, I'm not God. I don't know. I can only speak for Stella. But I know that we're able to break through that cocoon, our own cocoon, through a heartbreak, through that first heartbreak. And you don't even realize that during that painful time, you were growing. During that doubtful time, you were growing. And then one wing comes out and the other wing comes out, and you're able to fly and try again. But the first heartbreak, you don't have two first heartbreaks. You only have one. It makes you stronger, I believe. It does. It makes you resilient. I believe that when you have a negative, it can turn into a positive. I think, this is just my opinion, that a heartbreak shapes you to become the woman that you can be and should be. But we just have to break through that cocoon and fly away. See, when you look at that butterfly, going through that process prior to that, it is nasty. It is, you can't see the beauty beneath. But when they fly off and they break through that shell, it's a beautiful view. But they had to go through that process. I believe that that's what is continuously happening in my life. I have my smaller cocoons, but the first heartbreak is the bigger cocoon. And it just looks like whatever I thought was a giant is not anymore. I think it's just part of human nature to go through that. But as women, it just hits us. It hits us a little bit much deeper. Do you give your all for that love that you expect, or the idea of love? What does love mean to you? And did you lose a part of yourself? I know for me, I can truly say I did. I did, but then I didn't. I became a different Stella whenever I flew off. I morphed into a different Stella. I became a different form of me once I was able to break through that cocoon. I was still authentically Stella, but I became a different Stella. Now, with this, I've had moments in my life where a situation has made me a better version of myself, and the situation has made me a not so better version of myself. And when I go through something shocking like a heartbreak, I always find solace. I find a time and a moment to just reflect. And as I get older, I'm very delicate on how I come out of those situations. I want to become intentional, to become a better me. Need to be a better you. So how do you get over a first heartbreak? Please let me know. Now, opened up to you. Let's open up to each other, because this is a conversation. This is Becoming Podcast after 7 p.m. Heartbreak. I'm your host, Stella O.